Hi, Matt Easton, Scholar Gladiatoria here. I'm with Scott Brown again, and we're in Arundel Castle on a beautiful summer's day in Sussex, in England. And I want to talk to Scott about tournaments in general, and the fact that Scott's been fairly involved or fairly vocal on issues around tournaments, both at European and American events. And he's been, he's seen the tournament scenes in both areas. So Scott, I take it you're basically pro tournaments in HEMA. You think that they're a force for good?
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people associate me with being a big tournament guy, but my personal opinion on them is actually they provide they're useful to a point. And they provide a lot of opportunity. They're great for inspiring up-and-coming fencers. They move equipment standards forward better. They improve the athleticism of people because they want to compete and do well. But I think I think there's a kind of a culture brewing where people are misconstruing tournaments for being good historical fencers. Because the competitions in and of themselves are, especially as we talked about in the other interview, because we're focusing on modern concepts, we're moving away from some of the actual original intentions behind. Well, you were one of the early tournament developers as well, and if you remember, a lot of the conversation back in those days was we wanted to have an environment that was, non-choreographed, competitive, in other words, that would allow us to test and review our interpretations of techniques, because that was the big talk then. But what I think you're seeing now is people actually moving away from sources, which is understandable. The community is growing, so people are tending to let their instructors do that, and they're just showing up to train and whatnot. But I think we need to be cautious about it, because if we get too carried away with that, we won't continue to breed the culture of up-and-coming guys who read manuals and study manuals. I will tell you that I've run into a lot of guys in the last couple of years who will openly say, I've never opened a book, or I've looked at the pictures on this website or that website, or which is good, it's a start, but it's not the same thing as spending extended time with the source and pushing through, trying to unravel it, trying to see where it correlates with itself, where it contradicts itself, as well as other personal subtleties within it.
Yeah, I think it's important to keep in mind the raison d'etre of why we're doing the tournaments, and to not become tournaments for tournaments' sake. Especially like you say, I think there have been some people who developed their fighting and their training simply to win tournaments, which in a way is perhaps historical in one sense.
Undoubtedly.
But in terms of working with the sources and getting closer to the actual source material, it's maybe not that helpful, and it might get in the way of progress, actually.
Well, correct. It may, just by the context it creates in and of itself, create a new format for developing technique. Again, another reason to go back and look at the historical techniques. These historical tournaments, those tournaments were being run side by side during the same times as most of the manuals we study. So while they may not be for the exact same context in every manual or every part of every manual, they were certainly sister arts. Whereas we might end up, and I think we're starting to edge into that perhaps, an environment where we're creating a new artificiality that really isn't close to historical behavior.
Yeah, well, I think that's enough for now. So there's some food for thought, and no doubt we'll talk some more about that. So Matt Easton, Scott Brown, signing off. Thank you. Cheers.